I'm Rachel Mercer, 36 years old. And the last time I saw my grandfather truly afraid was the afternoon. I showed up at his house without warning. It was a Thursday in late November. Cold enough that the trees in his yard looked like they'd been sketched in charcoal against the sky. I had the day off from the clinic and a tin of chicken soup on the passenger seat, still warm from my stove. My grandfather, Henry Mercer, was 81, stubborn, sharp, and the kind of man who still mowed his own lawn just to prove he could. He lived alone in the house he'd built with my grandmother 40 years earlier. A small white place with blue shutters and a porch swing that creaked in the wind. I hadn't called because I never needed to. My grandfather used to tell me that family didn't need appointments. So I climbed the porch steps, balancing the soup in one hand, and knocked. The door flew open almost instantly. Henry stood there in his gray cardigan and house slippers. But he didn't smile. His face had gone pale in a way I'd never seen before. The color drained clean out of him. His eyes flicked past me toward the driveway, then back to my face. He grabbed my wrist so fast I nearly dropped the soup. "Get inside," he whispered. I stared at him. "Grandpa, what? Hide right now." There was something in his voice that cut straight through me. Not confusion. Not panic. Urgency. The kind that doesn't leave room for questions. Then I heard it. Tires on gravel. A car turning into the driveway behind me. My grandfather's grip tightened. He pulled me across the threshold and shut the door quietly, almost gently, as if the house itself might betray us if it made too much noise. He pushed me toward the kitchen and pointed to the narrow space between the pantry and the wall. "Stay there," he said. "Don't come out until I tell you." I should have refused. I should have demanded answers. But something in his face stopped me. So I slipped into the dark gap beside the pantry, pressing myself flat against the wall just as the front door opened. My mother's voice floated in first. "Dad?" "It's me." I went cold. Behind her came another voice I recognized immediately. Frank Dalton, her husband of 2 years. The man with the polished shoes and the salesman's smile that never reached his eyes. Then a third voice, female, clipped and professional. Someone I didn't know. Footsteps crossed the living room. I could see only a thin slice of it through the crack by the pantry. My grandfather had already shuffled back to his armchair, shoulders slumped, chin tucked down. If I hadn't known better, I would have thought he looked tired and confused. My mother, Denise, was 58 and beautiful in the careful way some women are beautiful when they work at it every day. Her hair was smooth, her coat expensive, her voice soft with concern. "Dad, we brought someone to help make things easier for you." The stranger set a leather folder on the coffee table. "Mr. Mercer, my name is Elaine Brooks. I handle family transitions and financial planning for seniors." Family transitions. Even hidden in the kitchen, I felt my stomach tighten. My grandfather blinked at her slowly. "Do I know you?" She gave a patient smile. "Not yet. But I'm here to help your daughter make sure your affairs are in order." Frank sat down heavily on the couch. "This house is a lot for one man, Henry. We've all been worried." The word made me want to laugh. My grandfather had never asked them for help. In fact, the last time I'd spoken to him, he'd mentioned, almost casually, that Denise had started dropping by a lot lately, asking questions about his accounts, his will, the house taxes. I'd felt uneasy then, but I'd done what I always did with my mother. I told myself I was overreacting. Now, crouched behind the pantry while a stranger spread papers across his coffee table, I realized I hadn't been overreacting at all. I'd just been late. Elaine opened the folder. "This is very straightforward. Financial power of attorney. It simply allows your daughter to manage things for you so you don't have to worry anymore." My mother made a sad little sound. "Dad, you've been forgetting things. Missing bills. Misplacing your statements." "I'm just trying to protect you." "Protect him." I bit down hard on the inside of my cheek. My grandfather looked at the papers as if they were written in another language. "What happens to my house?" Frank leaned forward. "Well, eventually we'd want to sell it and move you somewhere safer. A nice assisted living place. You'd have people around. And my garden?" My grandfather asked quietly. No one answered. My mother sighed. "Dad, Be realistic. You can't keep up with that garden anymore. Then she said the sentence that split something open inside me. He won't even remember this conversation by Christmas. She said it casually. Like weather. Like fact, I felt heat rush into my face so fast my vision blurred. My grandfather had taught me to ride a bike. To balance a checkbook. To plant tomatoes in straight rows. He remembered every birthday I ever had. Every school play. Every bad breakup. And my mother was sitting 3 feet from him. Talking about him like he was already half gone. But then I noticed his hand. Resting against the arm of the chair. Hidden from their view, my grandfather was holding a pencil. And on the back of an old envelope he was writing. Small, careful, precise. My breath caught. He wasn't lost. He wasn't confused. He was documenting them. The next 10 minutes felt like an hour. Elaine slid the papers closer. Frank kept talking about best care and making things simple. My mother kept using that warm, tired voice of hers, the one she'd used my whole life whenever. She wanted to make cruelty sound like sacrifice. My grandfather played along. He asked Frank's name twice. He forgot what month it was. He stared at the signature line and frowned like it was too complicated to understand. And every time they leaned in a little closer, every time their patience thinned, I could feel the room changing. Their kindness was performance. Their concern had edges. Finally, my grandfather dropped the pen. Oh dear, he murmured. Elaine bent to pick it up, but Frank was already exhaling in frustration. My mother pinched the bridge of her nose. Not today, she said tightly. He's tired. We can come back Saturday, Elaine replied. Maybe after the birthday lunch. He'll be more comfortable with family around. There it was, not just a signature. A stage. They were planning to do it at his birthday. With cousins and neighbors and church friends all around. So it would look loving, public, harmless. Daughter helping her elderly father with paperwork. I stayed frozen. Until I heard the front door close behind them. Silence settled over the house. Then my grandfather's voice changed completely. You can come out now. Rachel. I stepped out from behind the pantry on shaking legs. He was still in the chair, but the fog had vanished from his face. He looked exhausted, older than he had an hour ago. But his eyes were clear and hard. What is happening? I whispered. He rubbed a hand over his mouth. Your mother and Frank have been trying to get control of my accounts for months. My chest tightened. What? He nodded toward the envelope in his hand. I noticed money missing in August. Small withdrawals at first. Then larger ones. I asked Denise about it, and the next week she started insisting I was forgetting things. He gave a humorless smile. Funny how that works. I sat down across from him, suddenly cold all over. How much? Almost 12,000. I stared at him. He reached over and put the envelope in my hand. On the back were names, dates, and one phone number written in his neat block letters. Who is this? I asked. Marjorie Sloan, estate attorney. She handled our will years ago. He looked toward the window, toward the empty driveway where my mother's car had disappeared. I didn't tell you because I needed you to hear it yourself. If I'd accused your mother without proof, you would have defended her. He was right. God help me, he was right. I'd spent my whole life smoothing over my mother's sharpness, translating it into stress, loneliness, sacrifice. I had spent years making excuses for a woman who never seemed to run out of reasons to hurt people quietly. My grandfather leaned forward. Rachel, they're going to try again on Saturday. And if she gets that signature, I may lose this house before New Year's. I looked around the kitchen. The yellow curtains my grandmother sewed by hand. The dent in the table where I'd dropped a mixing bowl at age 12. The little radio on the windowsill that still played jazz on Sunday mornings. This wasn't just a house. It was his life. And in 2 days, my mother planned to strip it from him in front of birthday cake and paper plates. I folded my hand around the envelope so tightly the edge bit into my palm. No, I said. My grandfather looked at me. They're not getting this house, I said again, steadier this time. Not the money. Not the accounts. Not any of it. For the first time that day, something softened in his face, a tired little smile. Then, he said quietly, "I suppose we better move fast." I'm Claire Donnelly, 35 years old. And the night I carried a casserole to my mother's house. I thought I was doing something small and kind. It was a rainy Wednesday in March. The kind of evening that turned the streets silver and made every porch light look lonely. My mother had texted me that afternoon to say Grandpa was staying with her for a few days because he'd had a dizzy spell, and she didn't want him alone. I offered to come by, but she said not to bother. She had it handled. That should have been my first warning. Instead, I did what I always did with my mother. I ignored the little knot in my stomach and told myself I was overthinking. By 6 o'clock, I had baked chicken and rice in a glass dish, wrapped it in a towel to keep it warm, and driven the 12 minutes across town to her place. My mother, Diane, lived in a large brick colonial she couldn't really afford anymore, though she'd never admit that. Her husband, Mark, had gone through 2 failed businesses in 5 years. And every conversation with them lately had that strained brightness people wear when the bills are stacked. Just out of sight. The driveway was full. My mother's SUV, Mark's truck, and my grandfather's old Buick parked crooked near the curb. I carried the casserole up the walk and rang the bell. No answer. I could hear voices inside though. Low at first. Then sharper. I knocked again, harder this time, and when no one came, I tried the side gate. It had never latched properly. It still didn't. I stepped into the backyard, thinking maybe they were on the patio. That's when I heard my mother through the kitchen window. "Sign it, Dad, or you'll lose everything." I stopped so fast I nearly dropped the dish. The words hit me with such force that, for a second, I honestly thought I'd misheard them. My mother's voice wasn't loud, but it had that tight, controlled edge I knew too well from childhood. The voice she used when kindness had run out and only pressure was left. I moved closer to the window, keeping myself in the narrow strip of shadow beside the house. The kitchen curtain was half open. Through the gap, I could see the table. My grandfather sat at one end of it, shoulders hunched inside his brown cardigan. Arthur Donnelly was 79. A retired shop teacher with rough hands and a habit of whistling while he worked. He taught me how to use a drill, how to patch drywall, how to read a tape measure. He was the kind of man who still sharpened his own pencils with a pocket knife because he said electric sharpeners wasted perfectly good wood. That night, he looked small. My mother sat across from him, a stack of papers spread neatly between them. Mark stood by the sink with his arms crossed, watching like a bouncer at a door. Beside my mother sat a woman I'd never seen before in a navy blazer, holding a pen and a leather folio on her lap. Grandpa's hand was resting on the table, pale and still. "I don't understand why this has to happen tonight," he said. My mother leaned forward. "Because if you don't sign now, the bank can freeze the account while they review the late payments. Then the taxes fall behind. Then the house becomes a problem. I'm trying to stop that." The woman in the blazer gave a practiced smile. "This simply lets Diane manage things for you temporarily, Mr. Donnelly. It protects your assets." Protects your assets. The phrase sounded so clean, so professional. Which made it worse. My grandfather looked down at the papers. "I thought you said it was just to help with the bills." "It is," my mother said quickly. "Dad, please. You know how forgetful you've been." Something in my chest tightened. Forgetful. My grandfather forgot where he left his glasses sometimes. He mixed up Thursdays and Fridays now and then. He did not forget his bills. He balanced his checkbook in blue ink every Sunday after church. He still called me on the 1st of every month to remind me to change the batteries in my smoke detectors. Because habits keep people alive. I set the casserole down carefully on the patio table and moved closer to the window. The woman in the blazer slid the papers an inch toward him. "It's a financial power of attorney. Standard form. Once you sign, your daughter can make sure your home and accounts are protected." My grandfather looked up slowly. "And if I don't?" That was when my mother said it again, softer this time, colder. "Then you'll lose everything." The room went quiet after that. I don't know what broke in me first. The shock, the anger, or the sick, familiar realization that I had once again underestimated my mother's ability to make something cruel sound reasonable. She had always been like this. Charming in public, tireless when there was an audience. But in private, everything was leverage. Every favor became a debt. Every weakness became a handle. My whole childhood had been built around keeping her calm, keeping her pleased, keeping the temperature in the room from dropping. And now she was using that same machinery on her own father. My grandfather rubbed his forehead. Diane, I don't like signing things I haven't read. Mark gave a short laugh from the sink. Arthur, you can barely get through the sports section without falling asleep. I felt my hands go cold. Grandpa looked at him, hurt flashing across his face so quickly it might have been missed by anyone who didn't love him. That's not fair. My mother didn't even glance at Mark. No one's trying to be unfair. Dad, we're trying to keep you from making a mess of your own life. There it was. The contempt under the concern. The thing she almost never let strangers hear. My grandfather reached for the pen, then stopped. Maybe I should ask Claire to look at it. Every muscle in my body locked. My mother's face changed, not dramatically. Just a flicker. But I saw it. Panic, sharp and quick, before the mask came back on. Claire doesn't need to be involved in this, she said. She worries too much and turns everything into drama. Mark nodded. Exactly. I stood in the rain with my heart pounding so hard it hurt. My grandfather lowered his hand. I'd still like her opinion. My mother's voice went flat. Dad, listen to me carefully. If you call Claire, she confuse you. She make you suspicious. And then when the bank starts asking questions, you'll be the one left without options. I'm the only person trying to fix this. The woman in the blazer cleared her throat, suddenly uncomfortable. Perhaps we should just review the signature page. No, my grandfather said. The single word was quiet. But it landed. Everyone at the table went still. He looked down at the papers again, then back up at my mother. I said no. Not tonight. For 1 second, I thought it was over. Then my mother stood up. Not fast. Not loud, just deliberate. She placed both hands on the table and leaned over him in a way that made my stomach turn because it was so nakedly coercive. So far beyond anything she could later explain away as concern. You don't understand how serious this is, she said. The account is already in trouble. Mark and I have been covering your bills for months. That made my head snap up. It was a lie. It had to be. My grandfather had shown me his savings account in January when I helped him sort old insurance papers. He was careful with money to the point of obsession. He had no debt, no unpaid taxes, no missed utilities. He had enough saved to keep that little house running for years. So why was she saying this? Then I saw it. Half hidden beneath the top sheet was a bank statement. Just one corner of it. But it was enough. I recognized my grandfather's bank logo and below it, in thick black print, a balance that looked far too low. My skin prickled. This wasn't about helping him manage his money. The money was already gone. My mother must have seen his eyes drift toward the statement, because she put her hand over it instantly. Dad, she said, her voice suddenly soft again, almost pitying. You've made mistakes. I'm trying to clean them up before anyone else finds out. Sign this, let me take over. And we can fix it quietly. Fix it quietly. That was the moment I understood. She wasn't saving him from losing everything, she was saving herself from being caught. My grandfather's face had gone ashen. What mistakes? Mark pushed off the sink and came closer. Arthur, don't make this harder than it needs to be. I didn't think. I just moved. I yanked the back door open so hard it slammed against the stopper, and every head in the kitchen snapped toward me. For a second, nobody spoke. Rain blew in behind me, cold against my neck. I stepped into the kitchen with the wet hem of my coat dripping onto my shoes and looked straight at my mother. What, exactly? I said. Are you trying to get him to sign? My mother's face emptied. Not surprise. Not guilt. Just that awful blankness people get when their plan has been interrupted and they're recalculating in real time. Claire, she said at last, too brightly. You scared me. I ignored her. I looked at my grandfather. Grandpa, don't touch that pen. His eyes found mine, and what I saw in them almost undid. Relief, shame, fear, the expression of a good man who had started to believe maybe he really had done something wrong because the people around him kept saying so. My mother straightened slowly. This is private. No, I said. It stopped being private when you told him he'd lose everything if he didn't sign. Mark muttered something under his breath. The woman in the blazer began sliding papers back into her folio. Fast. Stepped closer to the table and picked up the top page before my mother could stop. Financial power of attorney. My grandfather's name at the top. My mother's name listed as agent, and attached beneath it. Exactly what I'd feared. A request to add her to 2 of his accounts and authorize property decisions regarding his house. My pulse roared in my ears. Claire, give that back, my mother said. I looked at her then. Really looked. At the expensive sweater she'd bought despite telling everyone money was tight. At the diamond earrings she hadn't worn in years until Mark came along and convinced her appearances mattered. At the desperate, furious tension in her mouth. How much did you take? I asked. The room went dead silent. My mother stared at me. My grandfather made a small sound in the back of his throat. Take? I turned the bank statement toward him. Grandpa, what was in this account 3 months ago? He blinked at the page, then at me. Just over 60,000. The statement in my hand showed less than 22. My mother lunged for it. I pulled it back first. And in that instant, watching the color drain from her face, I knew I was right. She hadn't come to rescue him. She'd come to finish what she'd already started. I'm Samantha's age now 34, and I still remember the smell of old cedar and instant coffee in my grandfather's kitchen the day he told me to hide. It was a Thursday in late October. I had the afternoon off from the rehab center where I worked, and I decided to stop by Grandpa Henry's house with a loaf of banana bread I'd baked the night before. He lived alone in the same white farmhouse at the edge of Ashford that he and my grandmother had bought 50 years earlier. He was 79, stubborn, sharp, and proud of still mowing his own lawn. I didn't call first. When I knocked, the door flew open so fast it startled me. Grandpa stood there in his brown cardigan, his face pale in a way I had never seen before. Not sick pale. Not tired pale. Alarmed pale. He grabbed my wrist and pulled me inside so hard, I almost dropped the bread. Go to the kitchen, he whispered. Behind the pantry door. Right now. I laughed at first because it sounded absurd. Grandpa, what, now Lily? That stopped me. He only used that tone when something was truly wrong. Then I heard tires crunch into the gravel driveway. Grandpa looked past me toward the front window and his whole body stiffened. Don't make a sound, he said. I barely had time to slide into the narrow gap between the pantry and the wall before the front door opened. My mother's voice came in first, bright and polished. Dad, we're here. She wasn't alone. I heard another voice too, male, deep. My mother's husband, Brent, and a third voice. A woman I didn't recognize. I crouched in the dark with my knees pulled to my chest, staring through the crack in the pantry door into the edge of the living room. My heart hammered so hard it felt impossible that they couldn't hear it. Sit down, Henry, my mother said. This won't take long. The strange woman set something on the coffee table. Papers. A thick stack. I knew the sound immediately because I'd spent enough time helping patients fill out forms at work. We just need a few signatures, the woman said smoothly. Then everything will be taken care of. My grandfather let out a soft, confused-sounding hum. Signatures for what? My mother gave a little laugh, the same one she used in church when she wanted people to think she was patient. Dad, we talked about this. It's just to help with your bills in the house. You've been forgetting things. That sentence hit me wrong the second I heard it. My grandfather forgot plenty of little things. where he left his glasses, whether he'd already fed the dog next door that he watched sometimes. But he was not confused. He still balanced his checkbook with a pencil and ruler every Sunday morning. He still called me every Monday at 8 p.m. on the dot. The stranger began reading from the papers in a flat, rehearsed voice. Financial power of attorney. Property transfer options. Long-term care planning. Then Brent spoke up. It's the smartest move, Henry. Sell the house now while the market's strong. Use the money for a care facility. No point waiting until something happens. Something cold settled in my stomach. Sell the house? My grandfather's house wasn't just a house. It was the place where my grandmother's rosebush still climbed the fence, where pencil marks measuring my height were still etched inside the hallway closet, where my grandfather had slept in the same room for 50 years beside the woman he'd loved until the day she died. My mother lowered her voice. But in the silence of that little kitchen, I heard every word. He won't manage much longer, she said. And if we don't do this now, the county will eat up everything in probate. Sign it, Dad, or you'll lose everything. There was a pause. Then my grandfather asked quietly, "Lose everything to who?" No one answered. I pressed my hand over my mouth. That was the moment it became clear. This wasn't concern. This wasn't planning. This was pressure. Clean clothes and soft voices wrapped around a threat. The stranger tried again. Mr. Mercer, these documents simply allow your daughter to handle your assets before things become complicated. Assets. Not memories. Not dignity. Not choice. Assets. I felt sick. Then my mother said the sentence that changed how I saw her forever. If you wait too long, she said, calm as rain, people will start asking whether you're competent at all. This way we keep control in the family. Control. Not care. Not protection. Control. I leaned closer to the crack. My grandfather sat in his armchair with his hands folded over his cane, shoulders rounded, eyes lowered. He looked small, frail, almost beaten. And then I saw his right hand move. Just slightly. He was writing something on the notepad he kept beside the chair. Tiny letters. Quick and neat. My grandfather was not confused. He was pretending. The woman slid a pen toward him. Just sign at the tabs. He fumbled it on purpose. It clattered to the floor. Oh dear, he murmured. Brent sighed. My mother inhaled sharply through her nose, the way she always did when she was angry but trying to look composed. Dad, she snapped, and for 1 second the warm daughter act slipped. Please stop making this harder than it has to. That was the real voice. Cold, impatient, cornered. My grandfather blinked at her as if he didn't understand. They didn't get the signature that day. After 10 more minutes of coaxing, they gave up and decided to come back Saturday evening. My mother said maybe he'd be clearer then. Brent muttered something about wasted time. The stranger packed up the documents with a look that told me she'd done this before. When the front door finally shut and the car pulled away, I stayed hidden until I heard Grandpa say, in his normal voice, "You can come out now, Lily." I stepped into the living room on shaky legs. He looked 20 years older and 10 years stronger at the same time. What is happening? I asked. He sank into his chair and rubbed his face. Exactly what it sounded like. He handed me the notepad. On it was a name, Miriam Cole, elder law attorney. Under that, one sentence. Check the bank. My grandfather told me everything in careful pieces. Small withdrawals had been disappearing from his savings for months. Statements had stopped arriving at his house. My mother had started pushing him to simplify things. Brent's business had gone under last spring, and suddenly they were always talking about how expensive it was for an old man to live alone. I acted forgetful, Grandpa said, staring at the front window. I wanted to see how far they'd go. I sat very still, trying to hold two truths at once, that my mother had done this, and that my grandfather had been carrying it alone. I didn't tell you because I needed you to hear it yourself, he said. If I'd accused your mother without proof, you would have wanted to believe the best. He was right. And that hurt most of all. The next 48 hours changed everything. I called Miriam Cole first thing Friday morning. She moved fast. By noon, she'd arranged a competency evaluation for my grandfather and filed emergency paperwork to freeze any transfer attempts until the matter could be reviewed. I went with him to the bank and watched the manager turn pale as transaction records showed thousands withdrawn under assisted access. Requests my grandfather had never knowingly approved. By Saturday evening, I had a folder full of facts, and my mother still showed up with Brent and the same woman, smiling like she was bringing dessert. This time, I wasn't behind the pantry. I was sitting in the living room beside my grandfather. When they walked in, the stranger set down the papers again. Brent gave me a tight smile. My mother's eyes narrowed the moment she saw the folder in my lap. "What's this?" she asked. My grandfather stood slowly, straighter than I'd seen him in months. "This," he said, "is the part where you leave my house." My mother laughed once, thin and nervous. "Dad, don't be dramatic." Miriam stepped out from the dining room holding her briefcase. "He doesn't need to be," she said. "I'm his attorney." The room went silent. My mother looked at me then, and I watched the exact moment she understood. Not that she'd been caught. Worse than that she'd been witnessed. The bank records. The legal freeze. The doctor's evaluation stating Henry Mercer was fully competent and under no cognitive impairment. The unauthorized withdrawals under review. The attempted coercion documented. Every warm lie she'd wrapped around this plan collapsed in under 5 minutes. Brent left first. The stranger followed. My mother stayed, just long enough to call me ungrateful, disloyal, and cruel. Then she turned to my grandfather and said, with tears in her eyes, "After everything I've done for you." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "Love doesn't sound like a threat." Clear. She had no answer for that. She walked out without another word. I wish I could tell you there was a dramatic reconciliation later. There wasn't. Some things don't break loudly. They break clean. My mother lost access to every account. My grandfather changed the locks. The missing money was traced and partly recovered. He kept the house. The rose bush stayed. The hallway marks stayed. So, I started having dinner with him every Thursday after that. Sometimes. When I'm standing in his kitchen and the coffee is brewing and the late sun hits the old wood floor just right, I think about how close he came to losing everything. Not the house. Himself. That was what they were really trying to take. His dignity. His place at the center of his own life. And I think about the whisper that saved him. Get inside. Hide right now. He thought he was asking me to disappear. What he was really doing was showing me where to stand. I was halfway up my grandfather's porch steps with a chocolate cake balanced in both hands when I heard my aunt say, "If he signs today, the house is ours before winter." I stopped so fast the candles in the plastic bag hit my wrist. For 1 second, I honestly thought I'd misheard her. It was a cold Saturday in November. My grandfather's 78th birthday. And I had driven 3 hours to surprise him. I'm Nora Whitman, 33, and I hadn't told anyone I was coming because that was part of the fun. Grandpa Frank loved surprises. He loved old-fashioned things too: real cake, real coffee, handwritten cards. So I brought all 3. The front door was cracked open an inch. Voices drifted out from the living room, low and urgent. My Aunt Denise spoke again, sharper this time. "I'm serious, Mark. Once the deed is transferred, we can sell before anyone starts asking questions." My chest went tight. Mark was her husband. A man who smiled too much at funerals and always talked like every conversation was a business deal. I never trusted him, but distrust is one thing. Hearing him and my aunt talk about my grandfather's house like it was already gone was something else. I stepped back from the doorway and stood very still. Then I heard my grandfather's voice, small, thin, tired. "I don't understand why this can't wait until after." Cake. The cake nearly slipped from my hands. Denise made the soft, patient sound she used when she wanted strangers to think she was kind. "Dad, we've been over this. You can't keep up this place anymore. You forget your pills. You leave the stove on. This is for your own good. I don't want to leave my house, Grandpa said quietly. There are sentences that split your life into before and after. That was one of them, because I knew my grandfather. He was not a man who said what he wanted softly. Frank Whitman had spent 40 years teaching high school history, 35 years married to my grandmother, and the last 8 years living alone in the same yellow house he'd built with his own hands. He was stubborn, sharp, and annoyingly healthy for a man pushing 80. He still raked his own leaves. He still called me every Sunday to argue about baseball. So why did he sound afraid? A third voice cut in. A woman I didn't know. Mr. Whitman, all this paperwork does is authorize your daughter to handle the property and your finances. It keeps everything in the family. Paperwork.property.finances. I set the cake down silently on the porch bench and moved closer to the crack in the door. From where I stood, I could see a sliver of the living room. My grandfather was in his armchair by the window, cardigan buttoned wrong, shoulders rounded in a way I had never seen. Denise stood over him with one hand on her hip. Mark leaned against the mantel with his arms folded. And on the coffee table, beside a birthday balloon that read 78, sat a neat stack of documents and a black leather folder. The woman I didn't know was flipping pages with manicured fingers. She looked like the kind of person who charged by the hour to ruin people politely. Just sign here, she said, tapping a line with her pen. My grandfather looked at the paper, then at Denise. You said this was about hiring some help around the house. Denise's jaw tightened for half a second before the smile returned. And it is. But we need to make sure I can manage things for you. You know how confused you get. I felt heat climb up my throat. Confused. That word again. Families use it like a crowbar when they want to pry an older person out of their own life. My grandfather's hand shook as he reached for the pen. Then he knocked it to the floor. Mark exhaled hard. Jesus, Frank. Denise shot him a warning look, but it was too late. I saw my grandfather flinch. That did it. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room froze. Denise's face lost all color. Mark straightened off the mantel. The strange woman lowered her pen. And my grandfather looked up at me with such naked relief that it broke something open in my chest. Nora? He said. I forced a smile even though my pulse was slamming in my ears. Happy birthday, Grandpa. For a second, nobody moved. Then Denise recovered first because she always did. What are you doing here? Surprising Grandpa, I said, glancing at the papers on the table. Looks like I interrupted something. It's family business, Mark said. I looked at him. Then why is there a stranger in the room? The woman stiffened. I'm a consultant. For what? Denise stepped between us. Nora, now is not the time. But it was exactly the time, and all of us knew it. I walked to my grandfather's chair and set a hand on his shoulder. He was cold. Not physically frail cold. The cold of someone under pressure. Grandpa, I said, keeping my voice calm. Do you want to sign these papers? He looked at Denise first. That look told me everything. Then he looked back at me and said very quietly, no. Silence hit the room like glass breaking. Denise laughed once too quickly. Dad doesn't understand what they are. That's the problem. I understand enough, he said, and though his voice was weak, I heard something steady under it. I understand I don't want to leave my home. Mark's expression hardened. Frank, nobody's forcing you out. I turned to him so fast he actually took a step back. Then why are you discussing selling the house before winter? I asked. Denise's mouth parted. Just slightly. But enough. She hadn't expected anyone to hear that part. I watched the calculation happen behind her eyes. Deny. Deflect. Make me the problem. That had been her pattern my whole life. Denise didn't scream when cornered. She rearranged the room until everyone else looked unreasonable. You misunderstood, she said. We're trying to help him. He's been slipping for months. He forgot to pay the water bill in September. He left the side gate open. Last week he called me by your mother's name. I almost laughed because the details were so flimsy, so small. So obviously rehearsed. Last week he also beat me at chess and reminded me that Grover Cleveland was the only president to serve non-consecutive terms. I said, "Does that sound confused to you?" The consultant began quietly stacking her papers. Smart woman. She could feel the air changing. Denise noticed and snapped, "Don't." Then she turned back to me, and the softness finally dropped from her face. "You don't know what this costs," she said. "You don't know what I've been dealing with. The roof needs replacing. The taxes are up again. He can't keep this place. Someone has to think practically." There it was. Not grief. Not worry. Math. I looked around the room. At the old oak shelves my grandfather built himself. At the framed photo of my grandmother in the hallway. At the birthday banner taped crookily across the fireplace like a joke nobody had bothered to finish. And suddenly, I saw the whole thing clearly. The cake. The papers. The consultant. The pressure dressed up as concern. They had picked his birthday because birthdays bring sentiment. They make old men soft. They make ugly things look loving. I sat down on the ottoman in front of my grandfather so I was eye level with him. "Grandpa," I said, "has anyone taken you to a doctor to evaluate your memory?" He blinked. "No. Has anyone explained these documents to you separately? Without Denise and Mark in the room?" "No. Have you agreed to sell your house?" His hand tightened on the armrest. "No." Every answer landed like a nail. Denise crossed her arms. "This is ridiculous." "No," I said, standing up again. "What's ridiculous is cornering your father on his birthday with a property transfer packet and calling it help." Mark muttered something under his breath. Denise ignored him. Then my grandfather did something none of us expected. He reached into the side pocket of his chair and pulled out a folded envelope. "I was hoping you'd come," he said to me. The room went still again. He handed me the envelope with fingers that trembled only slightly. Inside was a letter in his neat block handwriting and a business card for an elder law attorney named Susan Teller. "I called her on Tuesday," he said, after Denise brought up assisted living for the 4th time in 1 week. Denise went white. My grandfather took a breath. Then another. And when he spoke again, the weakness was gone. "I may be old," he said, "but I am not stupid." Nobody said a word. He looked at his daughter with a sadness so deep it was almost harder to watch than anger. "I knew you were up to something when you started bringing me muffins and asking where I kept the deed." "Dad, no." His voice cracked like a whip. "You don't get to dad me while trying to take my house." Mark stepped forward then, maybe thinking he could salvage it, maybe just stupid enough to try. "Frank, calm down. Get out." It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Mark stopped. My grandfather pointed at the papers on the coffee table. "Take your consultant. Take your little folder. Take whatever story you were planning to tell the neighbors about how this was all for my own good. And get out of my house." Denise stared at him, as if she didn't recognize the man in front of her. Maybe she didn't, because the version of him she'd been counting on was smaller, foggy, grateful, easy to manage. Not the father who taught civics for 4 decades and could still make a room obey him with 1 sentence. The consultant picked up her leather folder without being told twice. She was halfway to the door before Denise moved. My aunt lingered. "Of course she did. Pride had always been her favorite sin. You're making a mistake," she said to him, but she wasn't speaking like a daughter anymore. She was speaking like someone who had just watched a deal collapse. My grandfather didn't answer. "I did. No," I said. The mistake was assuming no one would show up. That one hit. I saw it land in her eyes because it was true. Their whole plan depended on privacy. On timing. On the soft little lies people tell themselves in empty rooms. They hadn't counted on a witness with a birthday cake. Denise left without saying goodbye. When the door finally shut behind them, the house went quiet in that strange, ringing way houses do after something ugly has passed through. My grandfather sat back in his chair and covered his face with 1 hand. I knelt beside him. For a minute, neither of us spoke. Then he looked at the cake box still sitting by the front door and let out a shaky breath that almost became a laugh. Did you at least bring candles? He asked. I started crying so suddenly it embarrassed me. Full stupid tears. The kind I hadn't cried since my grandmother died. He reached down and squeezed my hand. Yes, I said, wiping my face. I brought candles. That night, we ate chocolate cake in his kitchen while I called Susan Keller from the number on the card. By Monday, the locks were changed. By Wednesday, the attorney had filed the paperwork to protect the house and his accounts. By Friday, my grandfather had rewritten his will with clear witnesses, clear terms, and no room for anyone to twist his confusion into consent. He stayed in that yellow house. He kept his garden, his books, his chessboard, his Sunday baseball arguments, and I started driving up every other weekend. Not because he needed watching, but because I had learned something I couldn't unlearn. Sometimes the people who raised us don't need rescuing from age. They need rescuing from family. I showed up that day to surprise my grandfather for his birthday. Instead, I walked into a plan to take his house. And the thing that still haunts me isn't the paperwork, or Denise's voice, or even the sight of that pen hovering over a line he didn't understand. It's how normal it all looked from the outside. A birthday banner, smiling daughter, a cake on the table. That's the part people don't tell you. The ugliest betrayals rarely arrive looking ugly. Sometimes they arrive wrapped in celebration. Holding a pen, waiting for an old man to sign. The first thing I noticed was that my mother had started speaking about my grandfather in the past tense while he was still sitting in the room. He was always so independent, she said to the pharmacist one Tuesday afternoon, her hand resting lightly on Grandpa Leonard's wheelchair as if she were the picture of devotion. It's been hard watching him decline. I stood 2 feet away holding his coat, and my grandfather, who had corrected my grammar over breakfast that very morning and beaten me at the crossword in under 10 minutes, looked up at her with a small crease between his brows. Like even he couldn't quite believe what he'd just heard. I'm Ava Collins. I'm 35, and until last fall, I thought I understood my mother. Not perfectly. Nobody understands Carol Collins perfectly. But I thought I understood her shape. Efficient. Controlled. Sharp around the edges, softer in public. The kind of woman who never forgot a thank you card and never let anyone else choose the restaurant. She liked being needed. She liked being right. And after my grandmother died, she stepped into my grandfather's life with such force and organization that I told myself it was love. She moved him into her guest room, temporarily after his mild fall in the garden. She started driving him to appointments, picking up his prescriptions, handling his mail, talking to his bank because all those online passwords stress him out. Helping. That was the word she used. Helping Dad. Helping with the bills. Helping with the house. Helping him remember things. It sounded so reasonable that I almost missed what was underneath it. Almost thought the papers found me by accident. It was a rainy Thursday in October. The kind of gray day that makes every room look tired. I had stopped by my mother's house after work to bring Grandpa a container of chicken soup and the lemon cookies he liked from the bakery near the hospital. I'm a physical therapist, and Thursdays were my late days, so I didn't call first. My mother hated unannounced visits. Grandpa loved them. When I walked in, the house was quiet. Too quiet. No TV murmuring from the den. No sound of my mother on the phone in the kitchen. No Grandpa asking if I'd remembered to rotate my tires yet because he had appointed himself guardian of all preventable maintenance. I called out once. No answer. Then I heard the shower running upstairs. I headed toward the den to leave the soup on the side table. And that's when I saw the manila folder half hidden under the couch. Not on the couch. Under it, like someone had shoved it there fast. I bent to pull it out, thinking it might be one of Grandpa's puzzle books or a utility bill that had slipped. Instead, I found a thick stack of documents clipped together. With yellow tabs. The first page said Durable Power of Attorney. The second said Property Transfer Authorization. The second said Pro Authorities. The second said Property Transfer Authorization. The second said Property Transfer Authorization. The third had my grandfather's full name printed at the top beside the address of his house. The Blue two-story on Maple Lane where my mother grew up. Where my grandmother planted peonies every spring. Where I spent half my childhood eating popsicles on the back steps. My hands went cold. I sat down on the carpet and started reading. The documents named my mother as financial power of attorney over everything: accounts, investments, property, medical decisions if needed. There were notes in the margins in my mother's handwriting. Get witness. Need notary. Ask Dad when he's tired. Less resistance. I stared at that line. For so long it stopped looking like English. Ask Dad when he's tired. Less resistance. It was the language that did it. Not legal. Not loving. Tactical. Then I turned the page and found the one she really never wanted me to see. A draft sale agreement for Grandpa's house. The asking price was already filled in. I heard the shower upstairs shut off. For one suspended second, I just sat there on the floor with the papers in my lap and the rain tapping against the windows and my whole childhood rearranging itself around one fact. My mother wasn't helping my grandfather. She was moving him. No. Worse. She was moving him out of his own life. I shoved the papers back into the folder and stood just as she came downstairs in a cream bathrobe, towel around her hair, surprise flashing across her face when she saw me. Ava, she said. What are you doing here? I held up the folder. The change in her expression was small. That was what made it frightening. Not panic. Not guilt. Calculation. Quick and cold. Where did you get that? She asked. Under the couch. She exhaled once through her nose. Those are private, are they? My voice sounded strange even to me. Because Grandpa's name is on every page. She walked into the den and took the folder from my hands with a calmness that felt rehearsed. I was going to explain it when the time was right. The time for what? Selling his house? It's not that simple. It looks pretty simple from where I'm standing. My mother set the folder on the coffee table and folded her arms. Your grandfather can't manage that property anymore. The stairs are unsafe. The roof needs work. His memory is slipping. Someone has to make responsible decisions. There it was again. Memory, slipping. The words she used like a key in a lock. Has a doctor said that? I asked. She looked away for half a second. Not formally. So no. Ava, don't be naive. You don't see what I see every day. No, I said. What I see every day is a man who still balances his own checkbook, still remembers my birthday before I do, and still tells the same story about meeting Grandma at the county fair with exactly the same details every single time. That doesn't mean he's capable of handling everything. I stared at her. Did he agree to any of this? My mother's silence answered first. Then she said, he will. He just gets emotional about the house. Emotional. As if love for the place where you built a life were some minor inconvenience. As if grief could be filed away under impractical. I was still standing there trying to keep my hands from shaking when I heard the soft squeak of Grandpa's bedroom door. He came into the hallway wearing slippers and an old green cardigan. One hand braced against the wall. He looked tired, but not confused. Not gone. Just 81 and slower than he used to be. What's going on? He asked. My mother turned so fast it was almost elegant. Nothing, Dad. Ava just dropped by. I looked at him, then at the folder, then back at him. Grandpa, I said carefully. Do you know Mom has paperwork to sell your house? He went still. It wasn't dramatic. No gasp, no stumble. Just stillness. Like a clock stopping. My mother's voice sharpened. Ava. But I was already watching his face. He looked at the folder on the table as if it belonged to a stranger. Then he looked at my mother. Sell my house? He repeated. She stepped toward him with both hands out, soothing, practiced. Dad, we talked about downsizing. About how much easier things would be if you stayed here permanently. He frowned. We talked about hiring someone to help with the gutters. The room went quiet. I watched the blood drain from my mother's face, and in that silence, everything snapped into focus. She had not told him. Not really. Maybe she'd wrapped it in soft language and practical concerns and little half-truths. But she had not sat him down and said, I am trying to take legal control of your money and sell the house you still think is yours. Because if she had, he wouldn't be standing there looking at her like she had switched languages halfway through a sentence. Dad, she said, recovering fast. You know the stairs are dangerous. You know you've had trouble keeping up. This is just to protect you. From what? He asked. She blinked. From making bad decisions. He gave a short, stunned laugh. Like raising you? That would have been funny in another life. In this one, it broke my heart. My mother went rigid. That's not fair. No, he said softly. Neither is this. I had never heard him sound older. Not weak. Wounded. There is a specific kind of pain in watching an elderly parent realize their child has been speaking around them, planning past them, using love as camouflage. It doesn't look like shouting. It looks like a man staring at papers with his own name on them, and understanding, all at once, that the room he thought was safe has not been safe for a while. I walked to him and slipped my arm through his. Grandpa, I said, did you sign anything? He shook his head. No. Did you agree to let Mom handle your accounts? No. My mother's voice came out tight. He did verbally. Then why do your notes say ask him when he's tired? I asked. That landed. She looked at me as if I had slapped her. For a moment nobody spoke. Rain beat harder against the windows. Somewhere in the kitchen, the refrigerator hummed on. Then my mother did what she always did. When cornered. She made herself the victim. I have been carrying this family for months, she said, voice trembling now. I gave up my weekends, my privacy, my energy. I've done everything for him. And all I get is suspicion. You don't get credit for help that comes with hidden paperwork, I said. Her eyes flashed. You think this is about money? I think there's a sale agreement on the table. It's about reality. No, Grandpa said. We both turned to him. He was still looking at the folder, but something in his face had changed. The hurt was still there. So was the age. But underneath it was the old Leonard Collins. I knew the one who taught 10th grade civics for 30 years and could make a room behave with one sentence. It's about control, he said. My mother opened her mouth. Closed it. He took a slow breath. I buried my wife 8 months ago. I left my own house because you said I shouldn't be alone after the fall. I let you take over the errands because I was tired and grieving and I thought you were trying to make things easier. His voice cracked only once. I did not invite you to erase me. I felt his hand tighten on my arm. My mother started crying then. Real tears, or real enough to look like them. She said she was overwhelmed. That she was scared. That she didn't know how else to keep him safe. That the house was too much and the bills were too high and nobody appreciated how hard it had been. And for one dangerous second, I almost folded. That old reflex. The one that says if someone is crying, you've done something cruel. If someone says they're trying their best, you should make room for the damage. Then I looked at the folder again. Ask Dad when he's tired. No. I took a picture of every page with my phone. My mother stared at me. What are you doing? Making sure these don't disappear. That night, I moved Grandpa out of her guest room and into my house. The next morning, I drove him to an elder law attorney recommended by a social worker friend of mine. By Monday, his accounts were reviewed, his mailing address changed back, and every draft document my mother had prepared was formally rejected in writing. By Wednesday, he had signed a new limited authorization naming me only for emergency medical coordination. Nothing financial. Nothing permanent. Everything witnessed and explained line by line. By Friday, he was back in his own house on Maple Lane with a part-time home aide. A handyman scheduled for the roof. And his own key in his own pocket. My mother didn't speak to me for 3 months. When she finally did, it wasn't to apologize. It was to say I had embarrassed her. That I had made her look like a thief when she was only trying to help. I told her the truth as calmly as I could. Help doesn't hide under a couch. Grandpa kept the house. He kept the peonies, the porch swing, the kitchen table where Grandma used to roll pie crust with flour on her wrists. He kept the right to decide what happened to the life he had built, and I kept one copy of those papers in a file drawer in my office. Not because I enjoy remembering them, but because I never want to forget how quietly betrayal can dress itself up as cared out. My mother said she was helping my grandfather. Then, I found the papers she never wanted me to see. And once I saw them, I understood something I wish more families talked about out loud. Sometimes the most dangerous thing an older person can lose isn't money. It's the room to say no before someone who claims to love them starts deciding their life for them.